There was one time in 2017, my first year, we were convinced that it would be a really, really good idea to put a giant scuttle crab on a river in China, like an inflatable uh, scuttle crab deal. And it just wasn't possible, but would have been sick. Hey folks, I'm Leif. I work at RIOT Games as a brand manager, and I'm going to take you through kind of start to finish of a Worlds campaign. It is Worlds 2021, but unfortunately, I can't reveal anything too exciting. But we'll go through kind of the strategy behind this year. We'll go through the creative behind this year, and then specific execution that came out of it, so you guys can have a good idea of how stuff actually comes to life. So I have it broken down into a few segments. We don't have to stick to this, but the long story short is I'll go through everything I just talked about, and then at the end we'll have 50 so for questions. So hold on to them until then, and then we can chat at the end. Cool. So first, some about me. Again, I'm Leif. I started in comm studies at UCLA, so communication studies, and what I did there was really different from what I do now. Basically, I worked in public relations internships for 3 or 4 years. It was all kind of pitching media and very not creative. But that experience, and I took all the internships and such that I had from my time in school, and I went to an agency called Firstborn in New York, and I interned there. I was able to work on a lot of really cool accounts. I think the coolest account was Supercell. So this is a picture of me with a Pekka from Supercell at ClashCon in Finland. And at Firstborn, I was a strategist. So a strategist is not quite the same as a brand manager, which is what I am now. A strategist is much more focused on research, knowing the game, knowing the community, kind of all of the basics, right? That everyone else uses to go and do their work. So I was kind of the hub of a project. And on the agency side, you're working on a lot of different accounts. So I was working on Supercell, but I was also working on Mountain Dew and Titanfall. I was working on Vonage, a lot of stuff that didn't touch games. Um, but I really liked the time that I'd spent on Supercell and on gaming. So I was able to kind of take that experience, snag a job at Riot, working as a junior brand manager on Worlds for LoL esports. So I started at Riot in 2017. In 2017, Riot looked very, very different than it looks now. This isn't super accurate or super specific, but on the left, you can see the 8 to 10 people that we had on our team when I started. And then on the right, you can see the like 20 to 40 people that. So we've grown a ton. And when I started, again, I was just focused on Worlds, right? So I had 2 or 3 years of just building campaigns for Worlds, churning out the big music videos, doing all that kind of very project specific stuff. But once we started to expand, I was able to move up to kind of the brand management lead. That's my dog. Brand management league for LoL esports as a whole. So not just Worlds, but also MSI, AS, channel strategy, content, all that good stuff. Um, so, like I said, we're a lot bigger now. We have teams for Wild Rift, TFT, Valorant. We have all these people that sit across all of our esports, and I think this is a pretty good testament to how much the industry is growing. Right? This is just 5 years, and there's I think 5 new games in there and a lot of new heads. Right? So, I'm a brand manager. I work in marketing, and I'll have a slide about what that means, but kinds of different things you can do in esports. We have everything from technical designers who are making the like schematics for the way that a banner will show up on a stage in person, right? We have everything from that to comms managers who are talking kind of that PR role that I had in college, right? But talking to press, pitching the stories, kind of getting our message out there, right? So there's a wide range of different jobs, especially as the industry is growing. Um, but like I said, what I do is management. So brand manager can mean a lot of different things at different companies. For Riot, it breaks down into three big buckets. So first one is brand marketing. These are basically things that go beyond any one project, any one product a lot of the time, and stretch over a lot of different kind of parts of the ecosystem and usually multiple years, right? So this could be positioning and tone for LoL Esports. We just recently relaunched that brand and the work that had to go into figuring out, you know, what LoL Esports stands for, how we wanted to talk about ourselves, and how we wanted to look. That look part and talking about ourselves part is executional branding, right? So once we have that positioning and tone, it's taking it and actually making all the fun stuff out of it that people see. Then partnerships and audience journey. Partnerships, constantly working with sponsors to pitch new projects, pitch new partnerships, figure out ways to find value for both sides. And then audience journey is probably the closest to what I used to do at Firstborn, right? So that's digging deep into data, making conclusions based off of it, and then going into product marketing based on what you know about that audience, right? So for product marketing, this is for something more specific. This is for something like Worlds, lolesports.com, a specific kind of part of the ecosystem. And with this, I'm going to take you through kind of what a brief looks like and what a go-to-market plan looks like. But those are the two pieces of product marketing. It's basically saying this is what we want this to be positioned as, and this is how we're going to get people to understand that, right, and to see it that way. Um, Tactically, it also means project ownership and budget management, and then working with regions all across the world to get our message out there. And then aside from the rote marketing stuff, there's the leadership portion. So goals and measurement, delegation, kind of being a representative of our team, both inside and outside of the company. Uh, and then just kind of knowing everything about Lolly Sports and being the person that people come to when they have a question about MSI in 2017 or whatever else, or at least knowing where to go look and find that information for them. Cool. So that's the intro. That's who I am and what I do. So now we're going to talk about Worlds 2021 specifically. The first thing is strategy. So Worlds 2021 is a big year, right? So last year we did Takeover. It was all about kind of infiltrating the mainstream, being unapologetic in how big our sport is, and kind of just getting our name out there in a way that, doesn't recognize the haters and the people that worry about sports versus esports and all of that. I think going into 2021, our insights that I'll show on the next slide about the audience showed that, while it's great to be out in the mainstream, it's also really important to have fan service to the people who are actively following us and love the sport, right? So our vision for Worlds 2021, that kind of the whole team rallied around, was this idea that this year we're going to take our first step in the next era of the sport, and we're going to express the kind of player first, passion first, competition first mentality that drove the first 10 years of growth in new ways. So three big pillars that breaks down into. One is capturing new fans. The biggest peaks of engagement at Worlds are driven by these moments when there's either really big pros on stage, really big teams on stage, or some kind of exciting IP integration like KDA or True Damage, right? And in those moments, yes, the active fans are important, but it's also important to kind of speak to the people that get those active fans excited, validate the sport, and get us to that, 100 million viewer place, right? So there's those breakthrough moments, and then there's building. So we got Showmaker here. I kind of see Showmaker and the team kind of sees Showmaker as our new faker, right? Like we have to build new stars to take the place of the stars who are obviously still killing it and going to Worlds this year and hopefully win. But on the other hand, we have to prep these new generation and these new stars to be loved as much as those old stars, and we have to do the same things for them that we did for the old stars, right? So there's a lot of we're going to try to do that this year, but it's all about capitalizing quickly and not letting the opportunity to build that next faker just pass by us. And then the last one is creating new advocates. So thinking about the holistic experience, we want to make sure that Lolly Sports is something that people are comfortable sharing with friends and family or talking about on social, right? We don't, want to be something that feels so niche that it's inaccessible. We want to have an experience that feels over good, really tight, really easy to get into, and really easy to share with other people. So this is kind of the mantra that drove everything we did for Worlds this year, campaign wise. Um, and then this is a very summarized version of the audience view that I gave the team based on that brief, right? So we have two main audiences that we broke it down into: people who are interested in Worlds, people who aren't interested in Worlds but do exist in the gaming space. So with the fans, we're really focused on getting them so stoked and driving so much hype that it ends up spreading to the rest of the gaming community. Whether that's by seeing a post on social, seeing us pop up on Twitch, any number of things that kind of just the people who are getting excited about Worlds share with other people to bring them in. There were a few main insights that guided the way we approached those people this year. One was that they don't feel connected to competitors. So right now, while we do have the showmakers of the world growing, there's kind of this gap between the people who used to win every year and the people who we hope will start to win every year, right? And There's not as many kind of clear stars and people to clearly become attached to as there used to be. So tried to remedy that. We also saw that these people wanted more ways to interact with Worlds. So we went hard on lolesports.com, the things we're doing on digital, um, take it beyond just the broadcast and also extend it to the game. And then we saw that these people are open to a new side of the sport. So I think a lot of the time at Riot and on League of Legends, having been around for so long, we are sometimes scared of kind of moving outside of what we know and what fans know. But we saw during Takeover that the community responded really well to something that felt more modern, um, and was less kind of completely tied into the game and felt less similar year over year. So we wanted to extend that for 2021. And then for the non-fans, that's our secondary audience, right? They're still important, but we're not as focused on them as the active fans. Like I said on an earlier slide, non-players are driving the engagement peaks. So we can't just ignore these people. It's just that we don't need to speak to them all the time. And we have to recognize that a lot of the time in speaking to our parents, we're actually interested, or we're actually driving interest and kind of drawing these people in, right? So if we're getting our active fans incredibly excited about finals, that's going to translate to non-fans as well. And they're going to hear that and see that. So in those key moments, we want to be speaking to them specifically, but again, mainly in those key moments. They're not our biggest priority. And then need a helping hand. So I think we've all like tried to introduce someone to esports and had a lot of trouble. I certainly have with LOL esports. Um, you kind of need someone to not just like make a video for you, not just give you something to go watch, right? But someone to actually kind of get into it with you and teach you every step and kind of answer questions as you go. As much as possible, we want to be trying to connect, again, the people who are already interested and can help make new people interested and make them understand. We want to bring those people together and kind of use them as a way in. Interested fans. I'm sorry, uninterested non-fans, hopefully future fans. So the goal statement coming out of that vision and kind of the sum up of all of our strategy was that this year's event is going to be a groundbreaking kickoff to the next decade of our sport, that builds fandom around the next generation and welcomes new fans into the fold. So this is strategy, and I think if you haven't seen it before, it might seem a little bit like gibberish. Like, what does this actually mean? And I think the fact of the matter is, it kind of is. Like, you have to look at it and recognize it as kind of academic that's going to inform creative. So when I share this with a creative director or someone on my team, I'm not kind of just reading it directly to them, right? I'm sharing the deck. I'm letting them ask questions. I'm usually giving a little bit more information to this. I just wanted to give you guys a high level view. And then I'm like including visual aids, explain, right? Because what I don't want is to just make a bunch of words and a bunch of slides that no one ends up using. So I think a really important part of strategy is keeping it simple. Like I said, this is even more simple than than what I sent to the team. But if you can break it down into something that's like one sentence or one phrase, that's usually a pretty good sign that the people you're working with will be able to understand and remember it, right? So generally, from me, if you're working on strategy simple, I think it'll be easier for those you're working with to understand. Okay, so after you got the brief done, it's time to bring in the creative team. So to be completely honest, I am the strategy team, less the creative team, but I do work very closely with the creative team, so I'll do my best impression of our creative director, Carrie Dunn, and take you through how that brief turns into real stuff. Um, so okay, this is going to be my impression, but this is our creative vision, our manifesto. This is basically the dramatic telling of that strategy. So this year it was about make or break, or it is about make or break. Worlds is the pinnacle of our sport. Its intensity is marked by soaring victory and crushing loss. And it's the dichotomy between those things that makes the event so compelling. Blink and all your dreams might become reality, but you also just might lose it all. 21, we're going to embrace the highs and the lows, the destruction of old legends as necessary to create new ones. Sometimes you have to break the past in order to make the future. So this is meant to be kind of very flowery, very dramatic. This is kind of the most extreme version of our creative, right? If we had to send the theme to one person and have them get it immediately, it would be this. So this isn't necessarily fan-facing language, but this is what everyone should be around and should be able to kind of understand and feel is different from previous years of our event campaigns, or even different from things that other people are doing in the industry. So, just a continuation of that, right? We really liked how this tagline and how this message could adapt to different parts of the sport and the event. So, make worlds break worlds, make legends break legends. Like, again, I talk about like the faker and the showmaker. Be a new faker until a faker is no longer at the top of the peak, right? So, you start winning 2 years in a row, you start forming a dynasty. Then you can kind of start to break the legends, right? But we aren't there yet. So we still find something interesting in that idea of kind of old fighting with new. Make dreams break dreams, legacies, same type of thing. Even on the tactical level, this idea of like make the meta, break the meta was really fun and I was excited. Hopefully, no pros break the game at Worlds. That would not be ideal. Um, and then this is the brand kit. So after our creative has made that vision based on my brief, we then bring in our art director. And generally on our team at Riot, we'll bring in a vendor who will help us make this stuff. Um, but you can see that this is a really clear reflection of that idea of dichotomy, right? So there's ribbons breaking. There's this really light white with this really dark blue. Um, Again, it's just the idea of like reflection, two sides of a coin. And it's a really clear visual representation of that message that hopefully people get and that sticks with them. Um, the other thing I'd point out about this is that, I think for us, the brand kit, the more stuff we have, the further this will go, right? So in past years, we've just had this like top left frame, like a hero frame. We've tried to take sections of that and use it in other places, but what we've realized is when we can, just make a ton of different assets, a lot of motion, a lot of different types of static art, um, that stuff ends up being used more often by partners like sponsors, regions, even internal teams, right? And then our kit goes a lot wider and it's a lot more useful. So this year we did a ton of stuff and it's being used in a lot of different places. So for example, on Instagram on the left, you can see the key art getting applied in different places like the format explainer, our qualification images, and then you can also see it in the client. So that's our event trailer and the hub that millions and millions of people will see, one of our highest kind of engagement areas to market, and a really good opportunity to show off the brand kit. So we do all this so that it can turn into stuff and make people aware of the event, make them aware of the theme, and start to like grow attachment to this idea of Worlds 2021 and make or break. Cool. I'm blowing through this a little bit, but let's get into execution. So now that we've got our strategy and creative, I'm going to tell you about one specific application of it and one specific project that we brought to life. It's the Manifesto film. The idea with the Manifesto film for Worlds this year, the big goal that I gave the team was to try and build foundational interest through compelling expression of the campaign message, right? So it's pretty simple, but we want to make a video, or at the time it could be any asset. We could have done something, you know, out of home or something like that. But basically, I wanted the team to get across the message of the campaign in a way that for the next 3 months, that Worlds is going to be either coming up or live. Um, and that broke down into a few smaller goals. One was that the film needs to feel as big as Worlds does, right? So there's a lot of kind of so I'm just reading chat at the same way I'm talking. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways that we can make Worlds big, but a lot of the time videos or art or creative are the things that can have the biggest impact because they just catch your attention and get you excited. So one thing that we wanted to get across off the bat was just spectacle. And then in terms of narrative, so we want to get across the message in a way that isn't totally reliant on voiceover, right? So we wanted to have visuals and an edit that would reflect the make break message in a really clear way and resonate with even non-English fans who are having to translate voiceover and may not get the message in the exact way we intended. And then future facing. So based on everything in the strategy, we wanted to focus on archival only as a way to talk about the new generation breaking the past. So we didn't want to dwell too much on kind of the heroes of yesterday, unless it was to demonstrate that there's new people coming to take their place. And then we premiered this at the LPL send-off ceremony. So that had some kind of influence way that we were making this asset. Of course, we ended up in Iceland instead of China, but we kind of made it in a way that we knew would appeal to that audience specifically. So this was the concept that our visual designer came up with, and it was called the leap. So the idea was that a young pro was going to take a leap through worlds past and then eventually arrive at the future of all esports. And just to caveat this treatment and also the script that I'm going to walk you through changed quite a bit. So what we're going to see in the final piece is pretty different from what I'm walking you through here. Is my mic back? We good? Awesome. Okay. Sorry about that. So let me just go back a couple slides real quick. Okay, so I wasn't reading through all of it anyway, so I'm not going to do that again. But basically, the way that we concepted this piece is not the same as the way that it turned out. So let's take a look at how it turned out. We could talk about the differences. Jessica, will people be able to hear me if I play this? Maybe we can just try and see. All right.
It all leads to this. One moment. You fly or you fall. Make or break. A new era is waiting. Make it yours.
Cool. So that's how it turned out, and I can give you insight if I can close this. Into kind of how much things can change between concept and execution, right? So you can see in the first version, we had this idea of standing on the edge and jumping off. That didn't work in execution. You can imagine why, but it kind of had some tones. And when you're in a city and you're jumping off a building, it just didn't feel right. So we had to say to ourselves, okay, when this actually comes to life, um, what's our new plan to try and make it feel better? And as you can see in the video, we decided on this idea of just like a comet falling down onto a city or kind of coming towards a city. Maybe it's a comet, maybe it's a pro, but eventually that kind of fall just transitions into a journey that we're watching, right? So we took away that starting moment because it just didn't feel right, and we ended up with a pretty different concept. You can also see that the script is much shorter than it was, or the actual voiceover is much shorter than the script was. Basically, there's only so much you can fit into a video, and a lot of the time when you're writing the script for a video, it feels like more will fit than actually does. I think another thing we've learned ourselves as we try and translate from that more fantasy driven kind of marketing to a more sport driven kind of marketing is a lot of the time with the less you say, the better. And a lot of the time with fantasy, the more you say, the better, right? So if you're hearing like a long-winded manifesto from your favorite character in a game and you're immersed in their world, it might make sense, right? But if you're hearing someone just talk and talk and talk about what it means to be a pro or what it means to compete, it can be harder to make it interesting. So we're still learning how to traverse that, but for this piece, I think we pretty much halved the text here. And then the last thing I'll say is that kind of balance between old and new was really hard for us to figure out, right? So there's this incredible pull that someone like Faker or Uzi or even Yankos has on stage, right, and has in a video, but that doesn't serve people like Showmaker, right? It doesn't serve people like Carzy to continue to build up the old pros. So we're constantly trying to find balance between the things that are going to be exciting and interesting to people who've already watched, right, and are interested in seeing the people they've already watched, and then trying to get both those people and new people excited about new narratives and new pros. So it's a difficult balance. I think we found a pretty good one here, but can let me know your feedback in Q&A. Which, incidentally, last slide. So we're pretty much on time. I think we have 5 more minutes that I planned for Q&A. But before we get into that, if you have any questions based on what we just talked about, and you want to get deeper into things, if you want to ask me about my career, what brand management is, what marketing and esports is, you can totally hit me up either at my email address, which is first letter of my first name and then last name at riotgames.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. We also have a lot of open jobs. So Riot is in hiring mode right now with everything happening with Arcane, our new esports. That slide I just showed you is going to probably double in the next couple of years, right? So please apply. There's lots open, and if one thing doesn't work out, again, 466 positions. There's a lot to choose from. And then I have time after this if anyone wants to take advantage of that Minter time conference app. Cool. That's my presentation. All right, so let me read some of these questions. Thankfully, there are a lot to choose from, which is awesome. All right, as brand management, did I help in some way with Arcane? Definitely. I think every year, so I told you I've worked on Worlds for most of my years at Riot. Every year there's kind of something with World League of Legends. So in 2018, it was the first KDA. 2019, it was True Damage. 2020, it was second KDA. So we've kind of built this this kind of expectation that there's going to be some entertainment beat associated with Worlds. Arcane's timing, you saw it's coming out on the 6th, so I can't go too deep into exactly what that is going to look like. There's a lot of exciting stuff that you guys will be able to check out, but really my role as manager on our team is when that marketing machine for Arcane comes to us and says, how can we work together? I'm kind of the filter, and I'm going to talk to them and figure out what resources my team can contribute before it comes to someone like my creative director or producer, who I need to just keep focused on their current projects. Let's see what else we got. Any outlandish ideas? Yes. Trying to think of that I can talk about. It's a difficult line to toe. Well, there was one time in 2017, my first year, we were convinced that it would be a really, really good idea to put a giant scuttle crab on a river in China, like an inflatable scuttle crab deal. We were about to do it. The only reason we didn't is because we couldn't get the permit. In 2017, Beijing's National Congress, which is a big government holiday, was taking place at the same time as Worlds, and it just wasn't possible, but would have been sick. Trying to think of other things. We've reached out to like all manner of huge A-list artists over the year and tried to make things work. This is a hard one with things that I can actually talk about, but yeah, lots of like big out of home stuff is a constant theme on our team. We're always trying to do things like, I don't know if you guys saw the battle axe and the taxi for World of Warcraft several years ago, giant barbarian for Clash of Clans in New York. That stuff is something that we're always trying to chase, and it's just really, really hard to execute, and we've never really been able to make it happen. How can low on the totem pole people apply some of these excitement-based planning to career building? That is a good question. So I think you're talking about kind of that idea of translating the excitement from active fans to like a wider set of fans. I think in esports, a lot of the time we do get really focused on active fans, and that's fair. We are kind of a niche part of culture, and to have to be connected to a game, not just esports in general, and then get into watching that game is a lot. So I think even for other games, I would say that same idea of trying to bring people into the sport probably applies. Um, and I would also say that I think for smaller games, it might even be more important because you don't get like the natural, placement on the front page of Twitch. You might have to go and, kind of actually figure out ways to activate your active fans and arm them with tools to advocate for you, right, and get people excited about your sport. But I think it's definitely applicable at every level. Um, Esports has an interesting dilemma in which the audience rails against forced narratives, and yet narratives and appealing characters are important. Yes, this is very true. So I've worked on Worlds since 2017, um, and I think almost every year for the World's music video, we've ended up like accidentally predicting who's gonna win. Like FunPlus Phoenix and Phoenix was a complete accident. Like I just accidentally called this on Phoenix. So like the scripting narrative, I know isn't exactly what you're talking about, but we are always trying to fight against planning things in advance that aren't going to end up applying, right? And that's a really hard part of not just esports marketing but sports marketing in general, is saying, okay, between not even semis and finals, let's say between week 1 and week 2 of the group stage, or between play-ins and groups, maybe we have 5 days. That's a really short amount of time to make things that aren't already planned, right? Ideally, everything that we're putting out during Worlds is like planned, ready to be localized. We have 12 different regions and I think like 15 different languages across those regions, and an equal experience for fans around the world is really important to us. So I would say with the force narrative, it's like we're always trying to prepare in advance so that we can have things done, have things localized, make them available to fans around the world. Um, but we also want to be able to, when something crazy happens, take advantage and capitalize on that. So yeah, I think forced narratives are hard. I dislike them myself too, and I understand why fans would. Um, it's kind of just one of those tough marketing things where you have to try and make it as appealing as possible, recognizing that it has to be a little bit forced. Let's see. How did your team handle esports talent that may be resistant to efforts of making them a star? That's a very, very good question too. I don't even think it's really just esports. I think people are over dramatic in our industry a little bit. Like if you go and try and watch untrained basketball players, shoot for their photos, it's as much of a struggle, right? Like they might be able to jump in the air, but they don't know how to face on camera. No athlete really does. So I think one thing I'll say is there's certain pros who just get to a level where they are a star and they do understand how to do that kind of stuff, right? That's kind of the upper echelon. But I think with the lower tier pros, or the pros who haven't gotten to that place yet in terms of stardom and fandom and followers, um, what we've been trying to do lately, I won't act like we've solved this because I have 4 years of like arms crossed photos under my belt, right? But what I'm trying to do now is embrace pros personalities a little bit more, even if they are shy, even if they're nerdy. Um, even if they're Beryl and they just play Genshin Impact when they're walking to the plane with the pillow on their head, right? Like whatever that pros thing is, we want to embrace that because there's probably someone who finds it interesting, right? Like if you put a spotlight on Faker in his first years before he was very famous, he was just a very stern, like pro, I imagine. I haven't been around long enough to know that for sure, but every star comes from somewhere, and usually it's not by kind of making up a persona. So what we've been trying to do is, again, embrace it. If you check out some of the like fashion shoots that have been done, especially in the LPL, it's pretty crazy how cool you can make like a skinny nerd look. I'm jealous of a lot of those photos and how cool they look, right? So I think we're always trying to, we're gamers ourselves. We are always trying to kind of embrace what a gamer is and not try and make them into something they're not. Um, let's see. When the community reacts negatively to something your team does that play a larger role in influencing whether you do that next? Definitely. Um, yeah, I was telling Jessica before our presentation. We obviously had a little hiccup with Pick'em today. If you follow us on, um, and I think in those situations, or in ones that are more creatively based, right? Like when we put out Phoenix and it wasn't loved at the time of release. It's case by case. I think, like, for example, with the issue with Pick'em, we all knew that was wrong. Like, we all knew a mistake was made. We all knew no one on our team would have written that, and we were like, okay, we have to troubleshoot this now. We have to get messaging out now because this is a mistake, not something that we have to like massage. Um, for something like Phoenix, our team like put a lot of love into that. Really thought that kind of the narratives around rookie caps and Faker, reflected their real careers, and so we in the moment, I think we were a little bit like, disappointed and maybe a little bit like stubborn, right? But ultimately going into takeover and going into our awesome video this year, we took lessons for that, and we said, okay, one of the reasons that people didn't love Phoenix was it sounded a lot like Legends Never Die, kind of felt like a RIT. We are like, okay, we get that. So we're going to try and make sure that we don't do something that feels really similar to the past, because then it's not making fans happy and it's not, worthy kind of use of our investment. Um, so there's different cases for every different product and every different positive or negative reaction. So the vast majority of the time, if the community reacts negative, making notes and trying to fix it for next time. Welcoming new fans is understandable. Yes, these are lots of very good questions. But most attempts seem like they're about, painting the broadcast in a really broad brush. I totally agree that this is not the way to go. I don't have a perfect answer, but what I do know is, personally, again, when I was getting started, or in the research I've seen about esports getting started, um, you'll see a lot of like new viewer streams, content created specifically for new viewers that are, kind of telling them exactly what to do and how to watch. And I think for me, that's a really hard thing to expect people to get on board with, right? Like, you're talking about people who already know nothing about the sport. You're probably trying to convince to get into the sport. And then you're saying, watch this like separate training document to get interested in this thing. And that training document, like, no offense to any new viewer streams, we've done them ourselves, but probably isn't going to be as good or as appealing as the mainstream. It's probably going to have less of the stuff that people respond to, right? So maybe it's like a caster memeing about something, or an effect that happens on stage or on the broadcast. Like, it's just always going to be a watered down kind of version of the main one. So personally, I've really loved what Valorant's been doing with co-streaming. I think it's such a great way to get people into it. And you know, I, before Valorant came out, was really terrible and hadn't watched very much, but kind of watching K-Day and everyone else break it down helped me understand like what Valorant is, how to play, and how to watch. So I like that approach, that kind of helping hand advocate thing. It doesn't have to be someone it can be an influencer, or just someone online who's helping. But yeah, I think on board with kind of the implication in your question. I don't think kind of babying a new fan is the way to get them interested, because sports are inherently something that you have to spend a good bit of time on. Uh, how do I differentiate between fan-facing language and language to be viewed internally? It's a good question as well. So on our team, fan-facing language is like pretty rare. And when we create it, like, it's in a certain format. So, we have a document where we'll write up like a YouTube description, a title, all that kind of stuff, and everyone knows, both just based on experience and also based on how that document is formatted and what it says, that if something's in that document, it's fan-facing, right? Um, Generally, if I'm presenting a deck like the one I presented to you guys just now, I think my team would assume that none of that is fan facing. As I was saying, specifically on a slide, that was the case. Um, we always kind of have a filter generally before we say things to fans. Of course, there's exceptions where things get messed up, but that's always the goal. This is the last one I see in here for now. So Jessica, if there's any more, let me know. But what is the minimum number of creative people needed to use the lessons of your presentation to improve the branding of my local esports event? Honestly, like 1 to 0, I think. Like, I'll go back to that slide. A really long time ago, so it's going to be a lot of flipping. I'm sorry. Um, so even in this situation, there was a time where like there wasn't really this group of people on the right. It was kind of just brand people trying to make event marketing happen. Of course, has many more resources than your local esports event. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's easy, but I do think like creative brand design all revolve around a very similar kind of area of the industry. And if you have the resources to get art made, if you have someone at your college or in your local community who's interested in esports and wants to get into it, like there's probably ways to do it without being quite as prescriptive and following every step in this deck. There's definitely a time when I was doing not just this but also this and this, right? Before we built our team. um, so don't be too precious about like how many people you need, or the exact heads that you need on your team to make it happen. I would say try and take the general high level stuff about like, okay, if I'm starting a campaign for my local esports event, I need to have a at the base level just like a goal, right? Like you could have the 3 slides I had, or you could just have this is the big thing we want to happen during this event. Then you need to have your creative idea off of that. It doesn't have to be a whole manifesto. It could just be like a tagline, but have some kind of manifestation of how that brief comes to life. And then when it comes to executions, again, it scales. You could do one video. You could just post. This could social campaign if you're tight on resources. Could be like posters you're making for campus. So I guess what I would say is, work with what you have. When I was in college, I was part of this ad team organization, Bruin Advertising and Marketing team, and we had no resources. And our Google research and the things that we would just kind of do, feeling it out, is remarkably similar to what I do in my job today, just with less money. So I experienced to just jump into it. Uh, what are some things I've found well for engaging new fans? Honestly, I'm not totally sure we've ever really hit it out of the park. I think the how and why to watch Worlds videos that we did last year alongside Takeover were in the right direction. To be transparent, they're very expensive for the impact they made, so that's the only reason, kind of iffy on them. But I think they were based on the same style as our most compelling, biggest asset. So when someone watched our music video on YouTube, it was a pretty easy transition into that video that, to be fair, it does exactly what I said earlier we shouldn't do, right? Which is try to educate people, but at least does it in a way that's through the lens of the music video and through the lens of like widely appealing creative. Um, so if we were able to hook people in those big moments, if we were able to get them interested, watch a video or put that video in client where they might see it and become interested, we had like a widely appealing uh, version of that new viewer content. But I don't know. Keep me honest. I'm hoping we can do something better in the future and cooler in the future. But yeah, I don't think we've cracked it for LoL esports. Uh, what's the food menu during Worlds? Um, it's a good question. I guess different ways to answer it. So like usually we're usually at a hotel of some kind, right? And usually that stuff is covered for breakfast and such. And then when you're actually at the venue, totally depends on the country and the venue. So like everything from, when I was in like Brazil for MSI, Latin food and Portuguese food and really good stuff. Kind of like tropical food. It's really just based on, it's a silly answer. And then in China, we had Chinese food and it was very different. So it's just all about where you are, what stadium you're in, who's catering, that kind of stuff. But usually it's pretty good. And pros generally get better food. And then final words, last short tip for students interested in my career. If you're interested in brand management, I would say the most important thing is to get some like tactical crafting with it, right? So for me, I came from kind of the craft and went into the esports. I think it's totally fine to go straight into the esports and try and look for like a marketing or brand job in esports, but try and find one where you can learn from someone, where there's someone who can help you build kind of the muscles for more traditional marketing that might not exist in esports, right? Or that people might not be as focused on in esports, because to get a few level higher, you'll be talking to people who went to business school. I didn't go to business school, but people who went to business school, people who are very focused on strategy and that kind of stuff. And um, there's a point where you do have to build up the craft and examples in addition to the esports part and kind of the industry knowledge. So that's not very good advice. I guess I would say if you want to do exactly what I'm doing, I would start on the agency side. Starting on the agency side really gave me exposure to a ton of different kinds of work, and helped me figure out that I loved, gaming and esports. And then when I wanted to move into that career, gave me a bunch of really specific projects that I could talk about that showed my competency. Cool. I think that is it. Thank you guys so much. Like I said, again, hit me up on LinkedIn or email if you have any questions for me. Thank you.